going into it, though, you have to understand that Mary, Queen of Scots, is dead, right? But are there any more Stuarts left around? Well, yes, there are, right? Whenever Mary, Queen of Scots entered into a period of house arrest inside of England because she was on the run for the supposed murder of her husband, the rulership is actually going to roll over to her 1-year-old son, right? And her son is named James, right? James was the 6th James of Scotland, right? So he was known formally as James the 6th of Scotland. He had not seen his mom since he was a 1-year-old in Scotland. Now, important little things here as well that some of you are probably beginning to ask yourself. You're like, wait a minute, Mr. Terry, a Scottish king is becoming the king of England? He actually very much is, y'all. And the other big thing about it that some of you are like, but wait, is he mad at the English because they killed his mom? Actually, interestingly enough, not really. He never really had a relationship with her. She might have actually killed his dad and stuff like that. And then on top of everything else, she was a Catholic. He's Protestant. You know what I mean? Like, he was actually raised Presbyterian, and he's going to adopt the Anglican Church when he becomes the King of England, right? So James the 6th of Scotland, though, funny little character. I absolutely love this guy, right? Because he's a very, very interesting personality. He's super arrogant. He's very aggressive. He was married at the time when he actually became king, and he also is the inspiration for so many cool things in English history. For example, for any of y'all know that very famous play known as Macbeth, right? The actual Shakespearean play of Macbeth was written while James the Sixth was at, we'll get to the numbers issue here in a second. When James was the King of England by Shakespeare, because actually James almost died on an expedition down to England, and he was convinced that there were 3 witches up in Scotland that actually cast a spell and stuff like that that almost killed him, okay? And that's going to be the inspiration for the Macbeth story. James is also going to have the Bible translated into English. You know his name very famously as being a colony in the United States of America, right? James is going to be super important, but the problem with James is the fact that he actually is this, right? He has 2 sons that will eventually, hopefully inherit the throne as well. Henry and Charles, right? Henry being the strapping, exciting one that everybody wants to take over, and Charles being the sick, weakly one that couldn't even make the trip from Scotland, though. Now, James, though, thinks he's like, that's what he looks like, but this is what he thinks he is. He believes he's an absolutist, right? And when he comes to power in England, he's going to try and exert that power, right? Now, when he was actually rising to the throne in England, he is known as James the First, right? Because he is the very first king of England named James. But some of you are like, whoa, 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 pump the brakes, Mr. Terry. You need to relax a little bit. How did this man's number change, right? How is he James the First, but he's also James the Sixth? That's exactly right, y'all. He is James the First and the Sixth. He is the only monarch in Europe or in English history that has 2 numbers, right? He's James the First and the Sixth because he's the first James of England and he's the 6th James of Scotland, right? See what happened there? When he actually comes to power inside of England, there's a moment known as the Union of the Crowns, right? So the crown of Scotland and the crown of England merge together, creating one autonomous country or kingdom, right? So the thing that you need to understand about it, though, is that when James comes to power as the new king of England and Scotland all rolled into one, he thinks he's an absolutist and he hates Parliament with a fury, right? Now, why would he hate Parliament? It's because they limit his power, right? He believes in the divine right of kings, right? He believes in that essence of an absolutist, that D word that goes with our traits of an absolutist, that idea of divine right, right? He believes genuinely, hold on, I'm taking a sip of coffee. He believes genuinely that as the King of England, that God is the one that placed him in power, right? He genuinely believes this, right? And he believes that his power is infallible, and he believes that his word is law. But the issue is, bro, you've just come to power in England where there is a parliament and a legislative body that is there and meant to actually stop you from doing that, right? So we're going to see a clash of personalities that's going to get really, really intense, right? He believes he's an absolute ruler, but he's got a lot of big problems when he comes into being this absolutist, okay? He's got things standing in his way, all right? So like now he's got 3 huge problems that are going to prevent him from ever becoming an absolutist. Now, again, if you ask AI or some historians, they will say that he is an absolutist. I don't think so. I think because you think you are doesn't mean you actually are one, right? Now, again, there are people that actually have way more degrees than I do that think he is one, but I disagree because his biggest problem is the parliament, and they wouldn't do what he wanted them to do all the time. So, like, he would just do these goofy little things called dissolve. We'll get to that whole thing. The other big issue that he has, though, is these people known as the Puritans, right? Now, the Puritans, let's talk about who they are, right? Well, first and foremost, there's 2 different kinds of Puritans, right? There are Puritans, regular, and there are Puritan separatists, right? Now, separatist Puritans are ones who believe that they can't stay in England, that they got to go somewhere else to be able to do their religion and stuff like that because they're being persecuted by the monarchs and then other members of the Anglican Church, right? Puritan separatists are going to be the ones that go off and found the Plymouth colony, right? They go off and found the Plymouth colony because they're they're like, we can't live in England anymore under this monarchy rule, and we hate the Anglican Church. But the question herein lies, though, is those regular Puritans that decide to stay, why do they dislike the Anglican Church so much? Well, the thing about it is let's look at their name, right? Puritans. And let's look at their backstory, where they come from. Puritanism goes all the way back to Bloody Mary, right? When Bloody Mary rose to the throne as the Tudor monarch of England, she's going to bring Catholicism back. And when she does, she's going to usher in a reign where she's going to have some people burned at the stake, about 300, right? Which I think is not that many if you're going to earn the nickname Bloody Mary. I think it's a little aggressive, right? Like Scabby Mary is better. Now, the thing about it, though, is when we're looking at it, she had people burned at the stake, and so a large contingent of Anglicans and Protestants are going to run away from England. And they're going to end up in John Calvin's Switzerland, right? And while in John Calvin's Switzerland, they learn the elements of Calvinism, the ideas of predestination, the ideas of a strict moral code where you actually shouldn't be drinking in public, shouldn't be singing in public, shouldn't have theaters, shouldn't have bars, don't do all these different things that distract from God, right? And when Bloody Mary dies and Elizabeth rises up, those people, those Anglicans, now come back with their Calvinist elements, and they want to get rid of everything Catholic about the Anglican Church, right? They want to purify the Anglican Church, hence why they're called Puritans, right? Now, Puritans are also very loud, right? They're very loud, and they want things to change in England because they believe that England is going astray and going down the path of the devil, right? So the thing about it is, he also has to deal with them. Now James has to deal with them, and they're beginning to get people elected into Parliament, which is a scary moment because not only does he hate Parliament, but now there are Puritans in Parliament that are also trying to slow him down as well, right? And James, you got to understand what he's all about. He wants more money, right? He wants more money because he wants a fabulous palace. He wants to throw parties and stuff like that. He loved to party. This guy loved to party, and he loved to actually flaunt his wealth as much as possible. But the issue here is, in a legislative body and a constitutional system, you get paid, King James, by the Parliament because they regulate the tax money, right? Now, going into it, though, there's a lot of different things that happen to James throughout his life, right? And throughout his reign as well, because he ends up dying, I believe, in 1625, but I'm going to have to look up that fact, okay? Now, the thing about it, though, is that some accolades and facts about James and his rule, there's a couple of things that are pretty big about him. First and foremost, he begins the colonization of America. That's something that we're actually pretty thankful for James for, right? James, thank you for beginning the colonization of America, just simply because it led to the growth of this country. However, could you have regulated the colonists a little bit better and made it so they didn't actually murder and genocide the people that already lived here? Fair is fair, right? So now going into it, though, Jamestown, Virginia is going to be established in 1607. And also Plymouth is going to be established in 1620. That's actually a wrong year right there. Those are going to be those Puritan separatists. And we see now why Jamestown was named Jamestown, right? Exactly, because it was actually founded in the era of James, right? Now, the other big ones as well that he did, he also has the Bible translated into vernacular English. This is known as the King James version of the Bible, right? Now, he also tried to make tobacco illegal, which is funny. Now, so the next ones, though, this one, and this one are funny little things about James that actually happened in his life that actually demonstrate the fact to me that he was not an absolute monarch, that he's a constitutional limited monarch, right? Now, one of my favorite facts about him is he almost got blown up, right? In 1605, two years, all right, after he comes to power in England, a lot of Catholics were super excited, right? A lot of Catholics that were secretly Catholic inside of England were very excited because they were like, ooh, his mom was a Catholic. And if his mom was a Catholic and a lot of Scots are still Catholic, maybe he'll lighten up some of the laws on the Catholics and allow us to worship publicly and stuff like that. Well, he didn't. James actually passed more laws limiting the worship of Catholics even further. So a bunch of Catholics got really, really upset and got very, very mad, and they tried to blow him up. And this thing was known as the gunpowder plot, right? This guy was one of the actual 7 members of a gang that got together and tried to blow up the King of England on November 5th, 1605, right? Also known as Gunpowder Day. That dude right there is a man by the name of Guy Fawkes, right? Write that man's name down next to the gunpowder plot in your notes, right? Guy Fawkes, G-U-Y space F-A-U-K-E-S, right? Guy Fawkes, right? Guy Fawkes and 6 other conspirators got together and they put barrels of gunpowder underneath the Parliament, right? Because James, as the king, has to come down there to open Parliament every time it goes into session, right? And they were just going to blow him up when he actually went down there. Now, the thing about it is the whole attempt was spoiled. He actually got arrested. He gave up his conspirators, and they all ended up being hung in front of the Tower of London, right? Now, the funny thing about it, though, is that led to the actual growth of a holiday in England, and also for any of y'all that have ever seen the film V for Vendetta, and or ever seen the guy on the internet known as Anonymous, right, that actually leaks secrets and stuff like that, he wears a Guy Fawkes mask, because Guy Fawkes then becomes an emblem of government dissent later on, right? Now, the other big thing about it, though, is that they actually have a holiday they still celebrate in England every single year to this day. On November the 5th, they have Gunpowder Day, and they light off fireworks and have big bonfires, and back in the day, they they actually used to burn effigies of Guy Fawkes. It used to be an anti-Catholic holiday. Now, the interesting thing about it, though, is also big, kind of like current, more modern English history neat thing about it is on Gunpowder Day is when Princess Diana gave one of her most famous interviews to British News when she actually told the British newscasters how mean and terrible the royal family was to her, right? Leading to her eventual split from King Charles and then, of course, her later on, you could argue, death, right? Now, like, going into it, though, also, one time, like, James tried to assert, like, his absolute power and he tried to make tobacco illegal, right? He didn't like the way it smelled and he thought it was bad for people and stuff like that. And so he issued a pamphlet that said, this noxious weed should be banned from our place. And then everybody kind of laughed it off and just threw it away. He then reissued the same pamphlet with his name on it, and people started smoking tobacco more because they were like, no, we're not going to do it more. No, I refuse to, right? And then also he wanted to raise taxes for himself. There was also a lot of controversy about James, mostly circling around this person, his royal advisor by the name of the Duke of Buckingham, right? The Duke of Buckingham was his royal advisor, who actually basically some people said that he was feeding him different ideas, right? Feeding him different ideas on how to tax people more, to go to war, right? And do all these other things as well. Now, going into it, something else that you need to remember about James is he also kept England out of a very big war, right? A war broke out in 1618 inside of the continent called the 30 Years' War, and him and his son would actually actively keep like England out of the war, which is actually a thing that they kind of get glossed over. That was a pretty good thing that they did, right? Now, we'll talk about the Duke of Buckingham in class a little bit, though, and a couple of other things, but what we need to understand, though, is that in 1625, James is going to die, and so when you really look at the whole thing, he failed at absolutism, and the people of England hated his guts, right? They hated him. They said mean things about him all the time, and then also, of course, every time he tried to do something, he would get really, really upset and stuff like that. Now, one time, James got so upset, though, that he did something really important. You need to write this down, right? He did this thing known as dissolving Parliament, right? He dissolved them, or basically, in essence, fired the Parliament, right? And he tried to rule without them for a year, okay? Now, the thing about it, though, is you're still not allowed to raise taxes, and it basically just turned into a big dramatic tantrum that he had, right? Now, going into it, though, he is going to die in 1625, and his son is going to come to power. But y'all, it's not Henry, the one that everybody wanted it to be, because Henry died at the age of 12 from tuberculosis, right? It's actually going to be the weakling son that couldn't make the trip down there, and he is known as Charles I, right? Charles I, the weakling son that only ever grew to be about 5'6", that actually was very, very sick all the time throughout most of his life. He was cripplingly skinny. He was very emasculated as well, because he couldn't really just own up or measure up to a lot of the other men in the British royal courts and stuff like that. Charles also was just didn't like his dad because of this whole Duke of Buckingham thing that we'll talk about in class and stuff like that. And then also because he thought he focused too much on trying to be an absolutist within a palace rather than trying to be an absolutist that takes over other countries, right? So Charles's big thing is he also believes in divine right to rule, but not James's version. He thinks that going to war is the best way to exert power, right? But you need money for war, right? And you need money for war. And Charles, when he comes into power, the people of England don't like him either, right? They're like, oh, it's just another one of these Stuarts that we absolutely hate, whatever, all right? But he comes into power and he needs money for war. And guess who's advising him the whole time to go to war? None other than James's advisor, the Duke of Buckingham, right? The Duke of Buckingham is whispering into Charles's ear, being like, we should go to war with Spain and also with France and take a bunch of their money because we don't have any. So, now, going into it, though, you need money for war. And Charles wanted to go to war. And under the advice of the Duke of Buckingham, he wanted to go to war with Spain. He asked Parliament for money. Parliament refused. And so what he does is he dissolves them, right? So something that we need to understand about Charles, though, is that he dissolved Parliament for the first time after the refusal to go to war with Spain, right? And he tried to figure out other ways to raise money so he could go off and do it another way. Now, the thing about it, though, is this is not going to be the first time he does it. Charles actually ends up dissolving parliaments 3, some argue 4 different times, right? Which is ridiculous, okay? Now, the big thing about it, though, is we're going to pick up on that in class, and we'll talk about Charles quite a bit and his 11 years of tyranny in class, but I'll see y'all soon. Y'all have a good one.